Hello and welcome back, friends. You are watching another episode from my series Quick Thoughts On, in which I always talk about different episodes from the rich Star Trek universe. 50 years and almost a week ago, NBC aired a brand new episode of the second season of the original TV show called To Babel. And these are my honest opinions about it. This episode was written by DC Fontana. If you know what kind of stories does she write, you would expect this episode to be about Vulcans and have strong characters. And of course, you would be correct. This is a typical DC Fontana Star Trek script, and that is a good thing. The Enterprise plays the role of a space taxi. This time they are transporting delegates from different planets and to bring them to a neutral planet called Babel. That's why the episode title is Journey to Babel. The last delegation Kirk, Spock and McCoy are going to welcome on board are the Vulcans. After seeing some reused visual effects shots, we meet the Vulcan ambassador, Sarek, and his human wife, Amanda. What is surprising is the fact that Sarek absolutely ignores Spock. Kirk doesn't want to comment on it because he is not just a soldier but also a diplomat, at least in some of the episodes, so he asks Spock if he doesn't want to beam to the planet and say a quick hello to his parents. But surprise, surprise, Sarek and Amanda are Spock's parents. That's what I call a great teaser. Kirk tries to find a way how to force Spock to interact with Sarek, so he asks him to explain to Sarek the functioning of the ship's computer. The awkward silence is stopped by Sarek himself, who explains what his problem is. He wanted Spock to continue his work, but he has decided to join Starfleet. That is the reason why Spock didn't speak for 4 years to his parents. His mother isn't very kind either. She manages to immediately tell embarrassing stories from Spock's childhood to his colleagues. Yes, a huge amount of mothers are like that and don't mean anything bad with it, but still it's not a very nice thing to do to your son. I mean, I am not surprised that Spock doesn't communicate with his parents. So, plot A is the Sarek plot. At the same time, a FaceTime call by Uhura starts the B plot, in which the Enterprise is being followed by a mysterious starship. But no time for that. Let's start the C plot, politics. The director has decided that it's a good idea to start this scene with a long shot of 2 golden midgets preparing their drinks for some reason, before panning to Sarek, who is immediately questioned by this big guy. And I don't mean he's fat, I mean he literally looks like a pig. He's a Tellarite. This is actually the first time we have seen the Tellarites in Star Trek, and their makeup was thankfully much improved in Star Trek Enterprise. Their ambassador asks him how he will vote for the admission of the planet Corridan, but he refuses to answer. Then, back in the B-plot, the mysterious ship kind of attacks. They just pass the Enterprise at Warp 10 without actual fighting. Back in the C-plot, the argument between the Tellarite and Sarek continues, and the thing I have noticed for the first X times of watching this episode, Sarek takes a pill. The next scene shows us the piggy dead. McCoy confirms that he's deaf, and Spock tells them one interesting thing. His neck was broken in a way which looks like an ancient Vulcan ritual, because of course Vulcans have rituals for breaking necks, and because Sarek has been seen arguing with him one scene earlier, he is the main suspect. But before they manage to question him, he collapses. He has a Vulcan version of a heart attack, and he had one also when the ambassador died. So now they have another problem. Not only do they have a killer on board, they also have to somehow save Spock's father. To make a complicated thing shorter, Spock must give his father a transfusion, even though it's dangerous for him, and his mother doesn't want to allow it. It's a good son and a logical man. He still wants to do it. And then we see my only real problem with this episode. The editing. We just cut to an Andorian having a fight with Kirk in a corridor. The attacker stabs Kirk in his back, to the lower part of his back, or at least that's what it looks like. So what part of Kirk do we see in a bandage? His chest. They try to interrogate the Andorian named Thelev, but he doesn't say anything, even under the influence of the truth serum. So now the part where all of the plots start to come together comes in. Spock suddenly has to take command, at the same time protect the ship from the other ship, and find out what was Thelev's motivation and if he was the only killer on board. Which means that he can't afford to undergo the surgery to save his father's life. Now, his mother is pretty pissed. Do you remember what was her reaction in the previous scene? Hey, you want to risk your life undergoing the surgery? No way, I won't allow it. But now, hey, you don't want to risk your life and undergo the surgery? Well, I hate you. Seriously, why the change? I mean, don't get me wrong, I do understand her reaction, and I'm definitely not saying that her reaction is wrong or anything like that, but I'm questioning the sudden change in her attitude. When Spock doesn't want to do it, she first politely asks him, then tries to talk about him being bullied as a kid, and when it doesn't help, she slaps him. And she really slaps him, as the frame-by-frame analysis shows. A huge respect to Leonard Nimoy. Most of current actors simply dodge slaps or punches. He proudly takes it. Unless this was an accident, of course. When Kirk regains consciousness, he doesn't want to allow Spock to let his father die. So he decides that he will pretend he is perfectly fit, take the command, send Spock to the surgery, give the command to Scotty, and return to bed. McCoy agrees and the plan almost works. However, when Kirk wants to give command to Scotty, the second ship starts to cause trouble, so Kirk has to stay in the captain's chair. Spock, during the surgery, wants to stand up and talk to the captain. Wow, is that supposed to be logical? I mean, if you have important information for the captain, what about the intercom, or telling it to Nurse Chapel and let her tell it to the captain? Well, another illogical thing happens. What does Chapel do when she hears that he wants to go to the captain? She sedates him without getting the information from him. Wow, why is everybody suddenly so illogical? Meanwhile, in the brig, the prisoner attacks his guards, so one of them has to stun him. When he falls down on the ground, one of his antennas falls off and shows a hidden transmitter. So he was always in contact with the mysterious ship which attacks the Enterprise. We have a little action scene, and when the assassin is brought to the bridge, Kirk decides to play a little trick. After the last hit, he decides to pretend that the Enterprise lost its power and is dead in space. And when the attacker gets closer, they suddenly attack them with their phasers. But because the Enterprise crew are the heroes, Kirk wants to beam the crew of the second ship to the Enterprise. When suddenly the second ship self-destructs. The assassin explains that they had to destroy themselves and that he has the same orders. And then suddenly collapses because he took some quick and painless poison. Somehow. That doesn't really matter, the important thing is that the enemies are dead and both Spock and Sarek are perfectly healthy. Spock explains that he figured out that the attackers had to be Orions, who needed conflict in this part of the galaxy. When Kirk suddenly collapses, Dr. McCoy gets him to bed in a purely medical sense, and he enjoys that he finally got the last word. He basically breaks the fourth wall, which is pretty unusual. I am a huge fan of almost everything that Dorothy Fontana wrote, and not only for Star Trek, so this story is not an exception. I, however, have a few problems with it. A small nitpick is that this episode has way too many stories going on at the same time. Most of the time when a movie or a TV show tries to do something like that, the result is a mess. For example, most of the superhero movies, especially the DC movies. However, DC Fontana manages to tie the plots together in the end and make it all work. So that's not really meant to be a complaint, it's actually a strangely worded compliment. The real problem I have with this episode is the editing. The worst example of bad editing is the scene where Kirk gets stabbed. And that's definitely not an artistic decision. If you watch the bloopers and some of the behind-the-scenes photographs, you will see that this scene originally was supposed to have a proper beginning. So I guess that they had to chop off some of the stuff for time reasons, which is a side effect of what I said before. There are too many things going on in this episode. Another example is the scene where Spock speaks with the main Andorian ambassador about the assassin. This scene simply cuts away during their conversation. The scene has no natural beginning or ending, it just ends. There are many more examples, but these two are the most noticeable. It's sad that they were limited by runtime. I hate when studios do that. And this is one of the episodes which would deserve something like an extended cut. The next episode, by the way, called Friday's Child, also suffers from bad editing, and even more than this episode. Everything else is basically perfect. No, I'm not talking about the makeup. The makeup is pretty bad, but as I said before, if something can be explained by the fact that this is a show which was shot 50 years ago with a pretty low budget, it won't affect my final rating of this episode. So, what would my rating be? On my scale from 0 to 10, where 0 is complete garbage, 10 is a masterpiece, and 5 is average, I would give this episode 9 out of 10. This is one of the almost perfect episodes and definitely one of the must-watch episodes. DC Fontana was a really great writer with a special talent to write characters. I don't want to constantly complain about that other show, but those writers could learn something from this lady. If the editing was less chaotic, this episode would get full 10 out of 10 from me. But as always, those were just my opinions. Feel free to write your opinions down in the comment section. If you like this video, hit that thumbs up button, and if you have some free time, feel free to watch any of the other videos I have on my channel. You should see some links on screen right now. This week I have to make at least 2 more videos, one of them about the next episode of Star Trek The Next Generation and one about the next episode of classic Star Trek called Friday's Child. So check this channel later this week. Until then, thanks a lot for watching and see you soon. Bye.